I come from a family steeped in
talking about it.
Talking about your feelings. And my family can't stop talking about it.
No, they cannot.
As much as you would wish, they are incapable of that. I just knew I was completely incapable of dealing with this, and I was just like, this is like a professional level of grief, and something that you need to have gone to school to understand how to navigate this kind of thing, and that was very helpful. I think,
Seth was the one that was like, I love you. I'm happy to, hold you while you cry, but you need a professional.
Yeah.
And I did.
Yeah,
I really did, and it really helped.
This episode is brought to you by Cologuard and Pine Sol.
Hey, you.
Hi, Craig.
How are you, Michelle?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good. We're back at our nice Airbnb
I know,
taping out
is-
here on the West Coast.
It's so beautiful out here.
I know.
Good
I
weather.
know.
Coming from, it's like East Coast weather's a little chilly.
In the Midwest, we had our coldest week and it hit down into the 30s, which isn't that cold
Yikes.
for us, but
I
it's
know,
cold.
I know, but when you live in cold weather, you know how in Chicago, if it's been 0 degrees or below 0, 40 people are like going to the beach. It's like 40 degrees and people are like, it's hot out here. So I feel like I've lost my cold weather edge.
Yeah,
I'm
you
kind
have.
of a wimp.
Yeah, people who live in the Midwest don't know DC is warm
It's the
most of the
South.
time.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why we like it there.
I get it.
I mean,
I
you
get
get
it.
pretty good weather. You get all seasons, but the summers are hot and swampy. So it's good to be in LA, and it's good to be with you.
It's so fun to be with you. I'm just having a ball doing these.
But today we've got, we're talking about some tough stuff.
Some tough stuff.
We've
And
been dealing with.
yeah, and we're going to talk about people who are dealing with family members with Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to the crew before we got started, and you talk about our Uncle Terry, our great Uncle Terry, and we didn't know what Alzheimer's was or dementia or anything like that back when we were younger. But we've been fortunate. We haven't had to deal with this like some people have.
Just to give listeners some context. So we grew up in a multi-generational household. Aunt Robbie was our piano teacher. She was like the piano teacher for the entire neighborhood. And Uncle Terry was kind of this distinguished gentleman who, one thing stood out with Terry is like every day he wore a suit.
Coat and tie.
And suspenders with a brimmed hat. He would wake up every day and shave. He was very regimented. He would eat prunes every day. I remember that distinctly. Stewed prunes.
Right.
Didn't know why. Now, as I get older, I understand the stewed prune
He was ahead of the game.
He was ahead of
the game.
But just setting the stage for as he aged, and he lived into his 80s. And both he and Aunt Robbie started to age as we grew up and became, I think it was by the time we were in 8th grade, it seemed like middle school age when Terry really started exhibiting signs of dementia. It came in the form of nighttime just confusion. So the things that we remembered growing up was always at night, because sometimes he started getting up and walking and reliving things. And at first I thought it was nightmares.
Yeah, we always thought it was nightmares, and we only noticed it at night because during the day, Mom and Dad would handle things and not worry us with it. But at night, you couldn't help it.
Yeah.
And
but realized that he would get up in his pajamas and leave the house sometimes with no shoes.
Yeah.
And then the search would be on. Where is Terry? He got out, and Aunt Robbie was getting older, so she didn't know what to do. So our parents, our mother and father, essentially became caretakers for them. And looking back, they were in that sandwich generation where They had young kids that they were raising, not a lot of resources, two really wonderful people who were aging right before their very eyes. And my mom, who was staying at home, was, she would take care of Robbie, bathe her, organize her food. Dad would take care of Terry, make sure that he was still shaven. It was really a sweet image to have our father, who himself was
disabled. Just to remind our listeners, our dad had MS and walked with a limp from the time we knew him, and it got progressively worse. And he would limp his way downstairs and bathe Terry and shave him and get him out of bed. And, it got to a point where he would ask me to go down with him to help him because it was getting hard for him to do it. And it was really an eye-opening thing for me to see.
Well, they made it look easy. Our parents did in this multi-generational household. But now as we're adults and look back, we just went through caring for Mom. And she fortunately never went through any dementia, but she got to the point where just sort of physically, she needed more care than she wanted.
Right.
And just the anxiety that comes with that, just realizing that that's what Mom and Dad were dealing with no money, needing to work every day. And I can tell you, we never talked about this, but I did feel a little lost because I felt like I didn't have Mom's attention, in a way, I didn't want to say that out loud, but I know when I think back on it, I felt, wow, she was exhausted. And I felt her exhaustion in the form of she wasn't there for me in the same way. She would cook dinner, but then she'd have to go down and do something for Robbie, or at night she couldn't sleep because Terry would get out. It just, I think now that I look back as a kid, I felt that loss.
See, I never knew that. And you're right. We have never talked about that. And, I was your typical boy, so I didn't. I felt like Mom was doing what she had to do. So whatever I wasn't getting, I sort of just thugged through it. And
well, so many families, and we're going to talk about this more, are in that same kind of crunch with aging parents, young kids, a sort of healthcare community that isn't really, prepared to support families in this process. And we are going to spend some time talking about that more today.
Yeah, and we have the perfect couple to help us with that. We've got Seth and Lauren Rogen with us today, and they have some history with caring for a parent who's had Alzheimer's disease. And so I'm really interested in that. And for those of you who don't know, Lauren is a screenwriter, producer, director, actress, and most of all, a philanthropist, along with Seth. And Seth really doesn't need any introduction, but he's also a fine actor and a funny person and writer, screenwriter, producer, director. But I want to welcome our guests, Lauren and Seth Rogen. Come on out, gang.
Hey, guys.
Welcome to the table.
So happy you're here. It's so nice to meet you.
Very excited to chat with you guys.
Pleasure.
All right, come on in.
We have not officially met or
No, not
had
really.
an opportunity to
No.
spend time together. And, I'm a fan.
Thank you. Me too.
Big fan. Thanks. But it's just sort of amazing to, know that people we see and come to love, to hear about their lives outside of the work that they do and the things that make them famous. And, our topic today, Alzheimer's, aging parents. You guys have lived it. And, in addition to all the things you do in the business, you're making a difference in people's lives. And so I just am grateful for the work that you do and just thankful that you guys are here to share some of that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. That means a lot coming from you. So
Yes.
thank you. Yeah.
So how are you guys?
We're good.
We're pretty good.
It's crazy times and
Yeah.
busy and
You're working on some good fun stuff lately.
Yeah, lots of stuff. I've been very fortunate to be working a ton. We're producing a movie together, actually, about Alzheimer's,
about
actually.
a young woman caring for her mom with Alzheimer's, based on a graphic novel about a young woman caring for her mom. And
and it's great. It's an animated film that's very sad and funny. And Julia Louis-Dreyfus stars as the matriarch character who
what made
has
you
dementia.
decide that animation was a good way to go?
Honestly, it was the book itself. It really captured the caregiving experience from a young person's point of view with humor and a lot of deep sadness. And it's black and white, hand drawn.
Wow.
And there's something sort of very poignant, I think, about that visual.
And how was it for you guys in the process of making it? Did it take you back? How did you manage it, just getting through the project emotionally?
Yeah, well, we've been working on it since 2016. Because it takes a long time to get a movie made.
I am learning.
And then to make a movie.
It's hard.
Especially an animated movie that is not expensive.
Yes.
We were recording last week just with Abby Jacobson and recording some of the more emotionally heavy scenes. And definitely, there was not a dry eye in the recording studio.
Oh, I bet.
But it's, in a way, it feels so good to tell a story like this in a way that, like, I think is very, it's not going to hit you over the head with sadness.
No, it's
It
very
just feels
entertaining.
Yeah.
It feels good to take something so sad and turn it into something that is meant for, ultimately, for enjoyment and entertainment. And although it's a sad movie, I think it's very uplifting and poignant, and it's a very nice creative exercise in that way. Yeah.
But we don't talk a lot about Alzheimer's. And as Craig and I were sharing earlier, like growing up, we didn't even have a name for it. It was just sort of Terry got out.
Right.
That's what it was. And eventually our grandfather rigged the house with buzzers and locks, and so it became less a discussion about the disease or the issue because it wasn't known as a disease, and it was just the process of containing him.
It's a disease that carries so much stigma, dating back to when you guys were experiencing it firsthand as children, and people didn't really know and were really scared and would look at someone with dementia and have so much fear. And I think in the decades that have followed since then, I think that stigma has lessened, especially in the last 5 or 10 years, I think.
It feels like in the last decade, there's been like a seismic shift in people's understanding of Alzheimer's and like willingness to even talk about it. When we first started like doing charity in the Alzheimer's world, nobody wanted to talk about it even. And getting people with Alzheimer's to speak and to kind of come forward and share their experience was very hard. And even people who had family members didn't want to talk about it. It was, we've, I think, personally seen Alzheimer's kind of start to go over that hump from being something like no one talks about to being something that like people seem more willing to talk about, right?
Yeah, and even in the early years of my mom's diagnosis.
Because she was early onset, so she was very young.
She was very young. She started showing signs at 52 and then was diagnosed just before she was 55. So, and she had, unfortunately, we had all witnessed my grandparents, her parents, have dementia. And so in those early years, my mom herself was ashamed and didn't want us to talk about it. My mom was a teacher. She taught elementary school for 35 years, first grade for most of that. And then to go from this woman who was an active teacher with children every day to someone who eventually was a shell of herself over a close to 18-year journey was, a long, long road. But not talking about it in the beginning because of that stigma, because of that fear that she had, that we all had, didn't help anyone. Didn't help me, didn't help her. Doesn't help the overall cause. And so eventually, as storytellers, we just kind of had to talk about it. I couldn't keep it in any longer. And for better or worse, my mom's disease advanced. And so, but I think once we started sharing our story was when I started to feel like I had any type of control over this thing that I didn't actually have any control over.
And I just want to, Lauren, how old were you when she was first diagnosed? I just wanted to get a sense of where were you in your life when you started losing your mom?
Yeah, just before I turned 25.
Oh,
So really young. Yeah.
So you were...
Yeah, it was at my college graduation when I was 22 that she repeated a story a couple times throughout that weekend. And because of what I had seen with my grandparents,
you knew what it was.
Knew. Yeah. But I didn't say anything out loud to anyone. For close to, I guess, a year and a half after that. And then eventually we were dating at that point, and my parents came out to visit, and it was very clear to me that this was happening. And I dropped them off at the airport, and I came back to Seth's apartment, and it was the first time I'd said it out loud to anyone, like something is going on.
Yeah, you said it to Seth.
I said it to Seth, and he was like, "She seemed fine."
Yeah,
and I was like,
of course. Like again,
I didn't really know her. I didn't know her.
He didn't know her.
I didn't know her at all, really.
Like,
so,
what do you mean?
Yeah,
She's
it was
great.
like one of the.
You're overreacting.
Yeah, it was one of the first times I met her. Like, she's a cool lady.
Yeah, she's funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
But soon it was obvious that unfortunately this was our path.
Well, another story I think about is how mom and dad trained us to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
You remember the chores?
Oh, yeah. We had chores very early on. Very early on. That's another thing, I think, one of the best things that our parents did for us is
real work.
Real work around the house.
And what I mean by real work is my chores were to clean the bathroom.
I cleaned the bathroom. What are you talking about? We alternated.
We alternated weeks.
Okay, because I loved cleaning the bathroom.
And I didn't, but I had to do it. Mm-hmm. Mom wanted us both to know how to have a clean bathroom. But my every weekend job was cleaning those stairs.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
We had 14 stairs. Notice I remember how many there were.
Yeah, you had to. Yeah.
That
went from
our apartment down to our great aunt Robbie's apartment. And this is what I remember about Saturday morning. Mm. You remember that tin pot that we used to have? We had a tin pot, a pot now that used to be on the stove, which was now used for cleaning. And you put a little dish soap in it, and then you put Pine Sol.
Ooh, nothing like Pine Sol.
And there was nothing like that smell. Like when you came home from school and mom had been mopping and you could smell the Pine Sol. So it was usually Monday because she had laundry on Monday. You come home from school and it smells like, new house.
Yeah.
And I have to say that to this day, when I'm mopping, if we don't have that pine oil smell,
that's it.
That's it, isn't it?
That's it.
And here we are in adulthood, and they're a partner of ours on this podcast.
Well, an appropriate partner.
How about it? So when you get a chance out there, visit pinesol.com and find out where you can shop for your Pine Sol. This episode of IMO is brought to you by Cologuard, a non-invasive colon cancer screening test. The Cologuard test is a one-of-a-kind way to feel more in control of your colon cancer screening through a prescription-based test with none of the prep that's required of a colonoscopy. When I was a coach, my players had a team of people helping them with their physical well-being. They had so many tools to make sure every member of the team was on top of their health and wellness. But what I want our listeners to know is that even if you eat well and have a healthy lifestyle, that does not mean you are low risk for colon cancer. The Cologuard test is the only FDA-approved, non-invasive option that looks for both altered DNA and blood in your stool, which can indicate the presence of abnormal cells. The good news is that when caught at the early stages, colon cancer is survivable in 90% of people. So screening and early detection are crucial. With zero downtime, no special preparation, and a screening test that's delivered right to your door, we shouldn't let our health take a back seat. So if you're 45 or older and at average risk, Ask your healthcare provider about screening for colon cancer with the Cologuard test. You can also request a Cologuard prescription today at cologuard.com/podcast. The Cologuard test is intended to screen adults 45 and older at average risk for colorectal cancer. Do not use a Cologuard test if you have had adenomas, have inflammatory bowel disease, and certain hereditary syndromes, or a personal or family history of colorectal cancer. The Cologuard test is not a replacement for colonoscopy in high-risk patients. Cologuard test performance in adults ages 45 to 49 is estimated based on a large clinical study of patients 50 and older. False positives and false negatives can occur. Cologuard is available by prescription only. This episode of IMO is brought to you by Theraflu. As a product that was created to provide effective and comforting relief when you're fighting the flu or a cold, Theraflu firmly believes that the ability to rest and recover when sick should be a right, not a privilege. You know, I think back to the time when my dad was working for the city of Chicago as a stationary fireman, and it seemed to us that he never missed work and he never got sick. But what we realized is that my dad didn't want to take his paid sick time because he wasn't sure if he would keep his job by doing that. And my sister and I realized that my dad would be sick, but he just thugged through it. It was a difficult thing for him to deal with then, and unfortunately, so many Americans still face this pressure today. 27 million Americans still lack paid sick time, which causes them to have to choose between losing a day's pay and getting the proper rest they need in order to get better. And what's worse, this all too common issue disproportionately impacts lower income individuals. Theraflu created the Rest and Recover Fund, which has committed nearly $1 million to provide microgrants to workers to help offset the financial burden of taking an unpaid sick day. It's been making a big impact, and Theraflu is committed to keeping the fight going, as everyone deserves the right to rest and recover. Learn more or help someone apply for the fund at theraflu.com/right to recover. But before we get to the question, I want you to tell us about Hilarity for Charity.
Yeah.
We, like I said, we spent the first few years feeling scared and sad and didn't know what to do. Yeah. And then eventually we were just like, I have to start talking about it. So we went to a few events, and then a friend came to us and is like, let's throw a variety show and we'll raise money for Alzheimer's in honor of your mom, which was incredibly moving. And up until that point, this was in 2012, I felt very alone. I was like, I'm the only young person dealing with this. And of course, I was horribly wrong, which I luckily was wrong because I wasn't alone. And there was, for better or worse, a community of young people who were dealing with it. And so I think that helped us sort of form the idea of let's create something where young people can have a voice and they can feel like they are part of giving back. And like I said, having some sort of control over something that they don't have control over. And so we just sort of looked at our own situation when we started raising money as an organization. And we're like, how can we actually help people today in this moment?
And we were finding with Lauren's mother, who was progressing, that like it was one of these things in life where like money just made it better. That's like right. And like you know, it's unfair when those things happen, and you don't, it's not like you want to look at a kid in the face and be like, money can actually fix some major problems. It won't. It cannot buy happiness, but it can for sure alleviate stress and angst, and the sense of impending doom, and we had around the clock. We were able to buy like a duplex for Lauren's mother and father, and he lived in one side and she lived in the other side with like 24 hours a day, 7-day a week care. And we just saw like, oh, this has made everyone's lives so much more manageable. And that was really part of the inspiration for like, what do we do with the money we are raising? Maybe we can help alleviate other people's problems.
Yeah. So that's how we started our grant program, in which we provide respite care to people who are caring for their loved ones at home. And we read applications every month, and the stories are unbelievably real and often quite sad and dire. And people are, doing everything they can with what they have, but it's often not enough to care for someone with this disease. And they need help, they need respite, they need a break. And so that's where part of our money goes into awarding these respite grants to people who are caring for their loved ones at home. We also created a lot of support groups. I was part of a support group for young people. The first support group I went to was like just a general group. And I remember there was a man in there who was in his 50s caring for his mother, who was probably in her late 70s or 80s caring for his mother. And I was just like, that's sad, but I'm 23.
Yeah.
Like, we're in drastically different boats. And so actually the woman who ran that support group was one who created this group for young people. And it was people under, I think, 35. And that really showed me community. Being with people who understand exactly what you're going through is so helpful. And can really, really get you through a tough situation. So we made a lot of different support groups, made them accessible. We were doing online virtual support groups since 2014, long before the pandemic and Zoom. And so doing that. And then, of course, we have a lot of programming for caregivers, symposiums. We do a large virtual event every year. All throughout the year, we do virtual learning workshops for people. And created what we call like the 5 brain health tips. So it's getting good sleep, eating well, exercising, emotional well-being. So, being active, being loved, doing therapy, meditating, and then learning new things like being mentally fit. So new hobbies, being socially active, those types of things. And
they've talked that it's different from, like, some people think puzzling and things like that, but they're learning that that's not necessarily the same thing as learning a brand new skill.
Exactly, Like they say crossword puzzles. Look, it's probably better than staring at the television.
Exactly.
Which we do plenty of,
Which we
by the
also
way.
do,
But if you're doing a crossword puzzle, you're accessing what's already in your brain. You want to learn new things. So like we took up pottery. I'm now doing Duolingo and just always trying to keep your brain like learning and growing as much as you can. And we created online coursework called HFC Universe. And the first level is taught by Seth and some other fellow celebrity professors.
Yeah, Quinta Brunson, Kristen Bell, and some other people.
Seth's a brain teacher?
Well, here's what's funny. We actually did. This is sad what I'm about to tell you.
Scholar.
We did a scientific study that was published where me and the neurologist Richard Isaacson both taught the same coursework to kids, and we proved definitively that young people learn things better from celebrities than from actual doctors.
Wow. It's not an uplifting fact, but it's a true one.
No, but it's
good.
But it's good to know.
It is good to know.
I know.
So whenever someo's like, why are you doing this? I'm like,
It's
because
like,
science has told me you will retain it better if you hear it from me.
The only thing, I wish that worked with voting.
Exactly.
I
No, it's the
mean,
inverse, I think.
And not to bring us down, but that was the hope. But
So no, not at all.
Lauren, does he make you call him Dr. Rogen now?
Exactly.
Only sometimes.
Only sometimes.
So what are you teaching? Teach us something.
Well, again, I think
For the moment.
things Lauren's talking about. Sleep is actually one of, I think, the things that, especially in like our culture, like you've been conditioned to deprioritize sleep.
Exactly.
And I think I'll sleep
What a terrible,
when I'm dead.
what a
It's
terrible
like,
phrase.
and you're frying your brain in the process.
It's true. And that's something that, like, I think, is very easy for, and it's good news. Like, that's one of the few good ones. It's like, most people like to sleep, to be told, like, prioritize your sleep.
I'm a big fan of sleeping.
Oh, it's great.
Bedtime is my favorite time of
That's
day.
like Lauren.
Literally, as we got into bed last night, I was like, this is my favorite time of day.
You talk to Barack, I'm just like, oh, it's over. I know. And he's like, there you are.
We got our puppy. It's just really. But it's funny because so many people are like, how could I sleep better? My sleep is terrible. And it's like, well, you actually can if you work on it and you bring in some tools and aids. We have a cooling pad. I have a weighted blanket. I have the best mask. We do white noise. I have cooling sheets.
We have
like
300 things.
I have a lot of things. But because I do track my sleep, I see that doing those things legitimately increased it.
Sounds like that would keep me wide awake.
Yeah, exactly.
All
it's
of
a little
that
stressful. You do get a score. Now, like, it's like they've gamified it. So, I get a sleep score, which does, in the middle of the night, I'll be awake, and I'm like, my score is plummeting.
It's like,
and every morning we're like, what'd you get?
I know. I had a pretty good score last night.
So,
This might be a good time to hear our question from our listener because help him get some solutions. So we have Natalie, who's our producer, will read the question, and then we'll.
I'm sorry, Natalie. You
Have
are
at it.
involved.
Yeah.
She wants to
You
pretend
got
like
a
she's not
microphone
here.
and everything.
Hi, Michelle and Craig. My name is Nick, and I'm 38 years old, and I live in Miami, Florida. I have an elderly mother who's recently been admitted to an assisted living community due to her Alzheimer's disease progressing beyond our family's care. But the road to getting there was tough. For several years, my dad and I were her primary caregivers. Well, my dad was her primary caregiver, taking care of the house, cleaning, cooking, and then I was my dad's caregiver. I'd grocery shop for him, make sure he was eating properly, come over to watch the game. But that often meant I was leaving my own wife and young son at home a few nights a week. Now my relationship with my wife is suffering. She's very understanding of my situation, but we lack any real time together outside of going to work, taking care of our house, making sure our son has everything he needs. And then recently, in one of our weekly visits to see my mom in her new care facility, she introduced us to her new boyfriend that she met there. The only problem is my dad is very much in love with her and dedicated to her still. We know in our heads that this is the disease taking its effect, but we're having a difficult time watching my mom turn into someone that sees me and my father as, quote, the assholes out to ruin her relationship with the love of her life. And now I'm left wondering, after all these years of strain, what will the emotional fallout of all of this be? My dad's sense of himself without my mom, and his heartbreak at what's happening at the end. I'll continue to be there for him, but my own home life has suffered so much for so long, and I know my wife and son deserve so much more. In the midst of it all, I haven't even begun to try to come to terms with the fact that my mom is no longer the same person that raised me and supported me through the best and worst moments of my life, and soon that she won't be here with us at all. How do we even begin to come together again as a family when we're all exhausted, already devastated, and have no real time to take care of ourselves? How do we move forward, each of us, successfully from here? Thanks for your thoughts, Nick.
Ooh, Nick.
Keeping it light.
Nick's going through
Welcome
it.
to the show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And thank you again for the animated film.
Yes.
We will need it.
It'll help
We will
us a
need
little
it.
bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot, Nick.
There's
Yeah.
a lot to unpack there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think one of the things that we learned early on is I remember because Lauren's father was taking care of Lauren's mother and was very resistant to getting help. I think especially generationally, it's like, and his parents had, you know, like there had been things in his family where people had been put in homes, and I think he was not thrilled with how that was. So he was very insistent on kind of bearing the weight of it. And one thing we learned was that often caretakers die before the person they are taking care of because of the physical and emotional toll it takes on them. And that was something we were like seeing happen in real time, basically, you know?
Very much. It was my parents were in Florida at the time. We were in Los Angeles, and it was very clear that the strain that was on my dad as her caregiver was not good. And it was so heavy and so immense. And so
it was one of those things where like he was in it and we would like leave and come back every once in a while. And I think like the 3 months that, you know, didn't seem like things had gotten much worse from his perspective. And then we, you know, because we, again, we're coming and going, would come back and be like, oh my God, like this is
a mess.
so bad.
And how did that manifest in actually, what were the stressors that you saw?
Yeah. Well, so my mom, you know, early onset is, well, so Dr. Isaacson will quote him and say, like, if you've seen one case of Alzheimer's, you've seen one case of Alzheimer's. So it really does affect everyone differently, although of course there are some things that you know are a bit more universal. So my mom just started getting more and more difficult, resistant to help. She also would wander. She would walk around the house from sunup to way past sundown.
And just scream.
And eventually she started screaming for hours, walking around and screaming. She also would walk out the door. My dad had to sort of put paper over the windows to cover up what was outside to try to keep her inside. And the toll it was taking on was huge, as I said. And we often felt like when we tried to step into caregive, there was resistance because he was her caregiver.
Yes. And he felt like he had like a system.
Yeah.
And like he was like, this is like, I know how to work the system. And you guys are messing with
so
my
not
system.
from your mom, but actually from your dad.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
You know, it quickly, you know, after the first couple years, it was clear. I would say by the time she was 58, 57, maybe she had to retire from teaching, maybe 56 even. And then by 58, 59, she really needed care. She was still mobile at that point, but it was pretty hard to, you know, get her to focus or, you know, stay calm in a lot of moments. And so I was in therapy at the time, still am. And, you know, my therapist was like, well, if your dad is the primary caregiver, then you should be your dad's primary caregiver. So sort of like, you know, what
what Nick has
said is, you know, when someone is the primary caregiver and they are showing that they are taking the lead, then as the child, it was very helpful to me to know how I could help. You know, before it was like, I don't know what to do or how to help. So it was like, how do we make this easier for my dad so then he can help my mom?
But there's also the nuance of like, when do you kind of force them into doing things they don't want to do? Because like you hope people will arrive at what is the right decision on their own.
Yeah, but that doesn't always happen.
That does not always happen in the amount of time it needs to. And so I feel like there was a moment where we were like, it was my dad actually who has no filter whatsoever.
It was. It really was.
We
all went to their house in Florida over Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and my dad was just like, he talked with his eyes closed, and he was just like, you have to move out of this house.
Yeah.
And you have to move to California, and you have to not be alone here. Like, he's like, this is an excruciating situation for you. It's excruciating for your children. It's just getting worse and worse. And he's like, there's absolutely no excuse to not leave and to come to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Well, and
basically.
this is one of these issues that even transcends the Alzheimer's issue.
Yeah.
It's, you know, dealing with aging parents.
Yeah,
period.
very much
I mean,
universal.
it was, you know, one of the challenges with my mom, who, you know, again, was always independent, but there was a level of pride in her. And even though we had the resources, she resented the help that we were. And so then I found myself sort of in a reverse parent-child relationship.
Oh, for sure.
Because getting her to stick to the diet she was supposed to have, or, you know, trying to make sure that she was being nice to the caregivers. You know, I could empathize with her, feeling like she wanted to maintain as much control, but she was making it hard. And this is with resources. So a lot of families are dealing with this kind of stress of aging parents not really being able to let go. And doing it because they don't want to be a burden in their minds.
Absolutely.
Yes, but don't realize how much harder they're making it emotionally for people by not getting help and just pride is a tough thing sometimes. I think, you know, and sometimes makes things better and sometimes makes things worse. You know,
and I think, you know, my mom, having seen both of her parents go through it, and my dad witnessing my mom's parents go through it, they saw a lot of things that they were obviously scared of and didn't want to repeat. You know, per Nick's question, I'll share my grandfather, my mom's dad, when he was older, his onset was sort of in his 70s. But my grandmother, you know, was having trouble caring for him at home and put him in a nursing facility. And shortly after he was there, walked in and there he was with his new girlfriend. And I was under 10 at the time, so I don't have a huge memory of it. But I know that it upset her so much that she took him out of that home and put him somewhere else that was unfortunately lesser. And that move wasn't good for anyone. And wasn't good for him, wasn't good for her. I don't think it was good for my mom or my uncle witnessing that. And so I think that my dad, when he was faced with it, really wanted to take that history into, you know, his decision to keep my mom at home entirely and to bring care in, which is wonderful, but as Seth touched on, not financially feasible for so many people. And so I think it comes back to, and it's so hard, and I can say it and it's easy, but like a level of acceptance.
Yeah.
And, you know, meeting someone where they're at.
Mhm.
And my mom early on actually kind of gave me an amazing gift. Early on after her diagnosis, I asked her one day if she was scared.
Mm.
And she told me that she wasn't scared for her, but she was scared for us
Yeah.
because she knew what we were going to be going through because she had gone through it herself. But that I was not to stop my life for her.
Yeah.
And I was not to move back home to Florida. I was not to give up who I was becoming in my early 20s to take care of her. And I think that, when I think of Nick in this situation, how we talked about his mom is not who she used to be. And I think it's hard, but to remember that, and we're not parents, but to imagine that I assume all parents want their children to be happy.
Yes.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what they would want. And so you have to, as the caregiver, sort of sit back and think, my mom, my dad, they'd want me to be happy. And what does that mean? What choices do I need to make in order to still live my own life in the way that my parent would want me to? And so people who are in the sandwich generation who are in the thick of it, right? Like caring for kids, caring for parents, have double duty of care. And it's so incredibly hard to manage that. And you just have to sort of accept you cannot make everyone happy
That's right.
Yeah.
in every moment. And some days it'll be your mom, some days it'll be your kid, and hopefully more often than not, it'll be yourself.
Yeah.
Because that is like what the oxygen mask thing, right? You put it on yourself before anyone else. Like you can't take care of other people if you're not taking care of yourself.
That's right.
Which is why ultimately I figured I needed to care for my dad so he could care for my mom. And so, I think that you just have to understand your situation and then you look for resources.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our country does not have universal health care as much as we all wish it did. And the resources for caregivers specifically are not yet, I will say with optimism, where they could be. Although there have been strides and there are actually a few government programs and state to state, it's also different, where you can get reimbursements, stipends, et cetera, for care or even reimbursements for yourself taking time off work. That's a huge thing.
Yeah.
If you're in the sandwich generation, you're caring for a parent, you're caring for a child, and
you have a job.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? So I'll say we at HFC have, we provide connections to care navigation services. So I will say like that is a huge thing. Go to a professional who can help you, a social worker who can say, okay, this is your situation. Here's what's available to you. Here's things you can apply for. Anyone who is, if you're at the beginning, middle, and at any point, turning to a professional, a care navigator, social worker, they can really help.
And remembering there is no shame in any of it. And I'm just glad that Nick is reaching out and asking for help. But it begins with making sure that families dealing with this situation start, as you said earlier, start to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because you can't get help from something that you're hiding.
No. And and it's uncomfortable. Like the companionship thing is a very prevalent theme and comes up with a lot of people, as you would imagine. It is in many ways like the most awkward element of
can't
it.
even imagine.
And it's right. My grandmother was in a home, and my grandfather was in the same home, and she had like a boyfriend who I think wasn't real, but she would talk about him all the time.
Well, he lived in California.
That's
she
right.
was in Vancouver.
She always
so.
wanted to go visit him
I
in
don't know.
California. And my
Was
grandfather.
there a reason she
They
needed
were-
to have
they were in their
make-believe?
mid-90s, by the way.
Okay.
So-
all
Yeah,
right,
they were
Yeah.
just very
Yeah.
old.
She
Yeah.
was trying to get
She
his
was
attention.
bored.
Yeah, exactly.
God.
I think
They
she was
went
trying to make him jealous.
They went on the Great Estates.
Oh, she would talk about it all the
man.
time.
All the time.
She would say dirty things. Yeah,
Oh,
it
yeah,
was
she
it was wild. But
She was a funny lady.
but it happens a lot, and I mean, or it goes the other way. Like with Lauren's father, if I may, like Lauren's mother was very advanced in her early onset, but also was very much alive. But he was very lonely, and his wife, as he knew her, was no longer there, and the companionship he wanted, and all that was no longer there, and so we implored him to try to start dating.
Yeah.
Like, and that is like also like, again, it's such an awkward thing to preach, and it's an awkward situation to enter into with other women as he's on J dates, trying to meet other women. And I remember there was a few, because it's like he would say he was married in the application.
He did, Well, I helped him create his profile.
It's like you gotta work on the profile.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not going to help you.
You need an asterisk there.
We put a line in that, like, I think it was at the end, and it was something like, and reach out if you don't mind that my wife lives next door.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
like, and we explained the situation, and he went out with a few women at first that he has some funny stories that I guess I won't share, but there was a woman who picked him up and drove him, and then when they pulled into the parking spot, she pulled out her handicap sticker, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't," and she was like, "Oh, it was my deceased husband's sticker, and I still use it. It's fine."
We got
like,
some benefits.
You don't like that.
There was no second date there.
Hey everyone, just want to let you know I'm back out here in LA and I'm having a wonderful time, especially since I'm staying at an Airbnb. I'm staying in one in West Hollywood and it is fabulous. The check-in was easy. The hosts were great. They left us some nice gifts. Coincidentally, I happened to be out here when my daughter's out here and she was staying on her own away from her father, checked into a hotel until she found out she couldn't check in. So she came out and hung out with me in West Hollywood at my Airbnb. And let me tell you, when she saw it, I think she had second thoughts. So we got to hang out a little bit and we did a tour, and it's a 3-bedroom place. It's got a laundry. It's got a pool. It's got so many nice amenities. And I told my daughter, I said, "Hey, listen, I know Dad's square, but you can come stay with me for a couple of nights. I'm going to be here till Friday." And she's like, "No, she had her own work stuff and her business stuff. And I get it. I used to be a hotel guy myself. But lo and behold, guess what happened? Just this morning, my daughter called me and said, "Hey, Dad, you mind if I come over and do some laundry?" I said, "Of course." And she came over and she did her laundry. We got to have coffee together, breakfast. It was fantastic. The next time I come to LA, or practically anywhere I go nowadays, I'm going to book an Airbnb because I can tell you it is so much nicer than staying at a hotel. And I just love the privacy. I love the room. And more importantly, I love the hospitality. This episode of IMO is also brought to you by Acorns. Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that matches you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money you've got right now, even if all you've got is spare change. You know, one of the best pieces of money advice I've ever gotten is from my father, Fraser Robinson. Always pay yourself first, which means put some money away before you even start paying your bills. So sign up now and join the over 13 million all-time customers who have already saved and invested over $22 billion with Acorns. Plus, Acorns will boost your new account with a $20 bonus investment. Offer only available at acorns.com/IMO. That's acorns.com/IMO to get your $20 bonus investment today. You don't have to be a Wall Street trader to invest. Acorns makes it easy for everyone. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/IMO. This is a really interesting point that you bring up here, because for Nick, he's seeing exactly what you folks saw.
Yeah.
How can we help him help his dad?
Yeah.
Because I think, Hilarity for Charity, what you've been through, you guys are right at the point where you can help Nick today.
Yeah.
It's I don't know Nick's relationship with his dad, but I think some very blunt, honest conversations were necessary, painful, but necessary, and actually really moved things in a better direction.
Yeah.
Like in our family.
Definitely. Yeah, no. And there was, I mean, I remember that my dad and I certainly, it wasn't all, sunshine and rainbows every moment of this, no doubt. And, certainly there was conflict. And there was one moment where we had deep conflict. And I was like, can you meet me at my therapist? And we had a joint session where we talked through everything. And that was really helpful to take time to listen to him and for him to take time to listen to me. And I think that, like as the child, you have this sort of like ownership, right, over your parents. It's like, well, it's like my mom and it's my dad. And but it was his partner.
Right.
Yeah.
And his spouse who was with him for, over 40 years.
Well, and you have the vision of what your life, how's it going to end?
Of course. And my parents had, my dad worked, he was the manager of a manufacturing plant. My mom taught elementary school. My parents were those people who were saving for this great retirement to travel, to, to live that moment. And they didn't get it.
All those sacrifices and,
And there's a lot of anger, a lot of anger. But to go back to what I said a few minutes ago, you have to have acceptance. And that is, it is hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but just to sort of remember where you are. So I think that for Nick, I would say for Nick and his dad, to join a support group, to go on our website and fill out the form, and they won't be in the same group because they're not in the same boat.
That's right.
And to talk to other people who are in it in this moment. Honestly, just being seen helps lower the stress. It just does. And so that's the first thing I would say.
Yeah. And as far as like the specifics of like his, Nick's mother thinks she has a new boyfriend, like, I mean, that would tell me probably that her dementia has progressed to a point where like
she's not the same person.
She's not the same person. And her father or his father should, again, I mean, it's easier said than done. It would probably behoove him to start accepting that and not trying to put her back into the box she used to be in, but rather make the hard, choice to accept that it is different now and it won't ever be the same. And that, the romantic relationship they once had and that companionship is just not there in the way it used to be, and he can lament it and he could be resentful towards her and try to stop her from being around this guy who probably makes her happy, or he could accept it and maybe do things for himself that offered him some sort of companionship or allowed him to move in a new direction rather than looking kind of backwards at what once was,
Well, it's a loss.
Yeah.
It's a huge loss
and,
that you face every day.
Every day. And it's, harder than actual death because,
the person sitting right in front of you.
Right there every day, reminding you I'm here, but it's still a loss. I'm just curious in your therapy support groups, is there a way to talk about that, with Nick's dad? Does it help to equate it to a death that, if she were actually physically gone, he would be able to give himself the permission to move on with life and to, take the steps to keep living himself. But I don't know if that's helpful.
I mean, I think you just said such a key term, which is giving yourself permission. I think that caregivers, especially when they're caring for their spouse and their parent, these people who are the key influencers in their lives, it is so hard to put yourself first, but you have to. You have to know that person loves you so much that they would want you to be taking care of themselves physically and mentally. And, and Nick's dad is in such a brutal position, and every day to have that anticipatory grief, which is, so rough. And to see this woman who he shared his life with and created a family with be different it is nearly impossible to accept that. But, you have to. A lot of caregiving techniques stem from improv, from the simple. When you learn improv, the first thing they teach you is yes and. When someone presents an idea, you don't shut it down.
Yeah.
You say yes and that.
Yeah.
And so when Nick's mom introduces her boyfriend and you want to put your head against the wall, you have to take a breath and be like, yes, that's your boyfriend. And also here's your husband.
Yeah.
And we can all sit together. And why don't we all have tea together? And it's this huge job to accept.
Yeah, the word acceptance strikes me. A part of this is the acceptance can lead to really dealing with the grief and the loss. And then maybe for Nick, there's a chance to find the laughter in it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like him and his wife are having issues as well.
So I'm glad you said
yeah.
that, Seth, because I wanted to bring that up because so Nick's helping his dad.
Yeah.
He's helping his mom. And he's married and got kids, and they're sort of going by the wayside. And I'm looking at the two of you and how you deal with it, with humor and with pragmatism, and then you start this foundation. Nick doesn't have that. Any ideas for Nick that we can leave him with?
Yeah.
Nick should go to therapy
He should
if
most
he's
definitely
not
go to
already
therapy.
going to therapy. I think that honestly, that was. I mean, we were very young when all this started. We just started dating. We were both in our early 20s, basically. And my whole family are social workers, essentially. My mother's a social worker. My sister is a social worker. I have one of my half brothers is a social worker. So I come from a family steeped in
Talking about it.
talking about your feelings. And my family can't stop talking about it.
No, they cannot.
As much as you would wish, they are incapable of that. I just knew I was completely incapable of dealing with this, and I was just like, this is like a professional level of grief, and something that you need to have gone to school to understand how to navigate this kind of thing, and that was very helpful. I think,
Seth was the one that was like, I love you. I'm happy to hold you while you cry, but you need a professional, and I did. I really did, and it really helped. And I think that having that type of person who has studied and knows how to navigate grief, a professional.
And they can go together.
Huge.
And we've talked just because I think there's a stigma around couples therapy, it means there's a problem in your marriage or relationship or something. But we've gone and talked to therapists together just about how to communicate about this stuff and how we can help each other and make each other's experience with it better, and I think that has been very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would also add that Nick and his dad have put his mom in a very safe situation where she feels comfortable enough to make a friend and find some happiness.
That's a great
herself.
sign.
And so Nick should give himself the permission to let his mom be there. And to go to his family and to not worry and not need to physically be there every day for she is cared for. It sounds like she is well looked after. And so therefore he should take that time and not feel guilt to spend time with his own family. Because I think that,
that's the thing. I mean, there was a moment where it was just do I see her every day? Is it bad if I don't see her every day? Can I take a few days off? Is it okay? It's for sure not the most fun thing to go do. So
no, when we were entering year 6 since my mom had walked or talked or spoken or cared for herself in any way. And that is exhausting. And it got to the point where I was like, I can't go every day. I can't go see her every day, and she wouldn't want me to.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I need to protect myself a little bit, and I think that Nick needs to honestly just be a little more selfish.
Well, he's got to protect his kids.
Yeah, exactly.
I shared that, when mom was going through it, I hadn't shared with anybody because I was young when she was taking care of our elderly great aunt and uncle. I was in grammar school, just sort of prime time. And my mother was absent. And I resented it.
Yeah.
And I didn't resent her, but I resented the situation because here I was, and maybe because Craig was a little older and in high school, probably at the time, you
driving and sort of independent.
It upturned our household.
Yeah.
So I shared that because for Nick, he's got to think about his future, his family's future, the toll this is taking on his child. And that's not the example of aging.
No.
that we want to put out there.
No, it's not. And again, go back to like, I imagine it's not what his mother would want.
Right.
Like, I think that is such a huge thing that caregivers become so selfless that they forget that they are humans who are alive and living and need to experience joy as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't just about being a caregiver 24/7, because that will not help his mother also.
Yeah. But I think it's like when you're miserable, it's sometimes easier to just be miserable.
Right.
And I think it's hard to pull yourself out of it sometimes. And if he's just really sad
Just in
because his
it.
mother's sick and he's just in it and his dad is unhappy, and like it's almost easier at times to hand yourself over to like the miserable side of things than to try to be around your kids and wife and act like a happy, functional person, you know? And I think that's something that, again, therapy can help a lot, and prioritizing your relationship and making sure that, you know, you are communicating with your wife and you're talking about all this stuff and taking time. I mean, time is the thing that you just need.
Scheduling time for the things you love, or just little things that help you. Like neither of my parents were big drinkers, but I remember, like, you know, my dad was going through it. He'd be like, maybe pour myself a drink tonight. And I was like, have two.
Yes.
Go
like,
for it.
I literally remember one time, short of illegal drugs, do whatever you want.
Whatever it
And if you want some
Like-
illegal drugs,
Yeah,
I
we
can
can
help.
do that. And I've
Not
got
for
this.
my dad,
I got
though.
this nice ceramic
Exactly.
bong that'll help you
to
out
make all that
there.
stuff. But I think I was so happy on days when Lauren made the choice that she didn't have to go see her mother, because I was like, that's her prioritizing her own mental health, and she's not abandoning her mother. She sees them all the time. We move them, 6 blocks away from where we live. They were very close, but those days where I could just see she was like, I don't need to do this today, and I'm going to actually maybe try to enjoy myself
Well,
today.
and if you talk about brain health, your brain health, when there is a genetic, predisposition, it becomes increasingly more important for the family members of people with Alzheimer's to focus on self-care for their longevity.
Oh, yes.
So
depression is not good for the brain.
Depression and sleeplessness and being distraught and upset, not taking the time to get the sleep blanket and the cold sheets and the meditation and all of it. It's just the irony of this disease that, you may be closely linked to it because of the genetic DNA, but that means that you can't lose yourself in the caretaking, because you need to focus, because there's prevention.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
There are things you can do.
That is the hope, right?
Yeah.
Someone is diagnosed, and unfortunately, there is still really nothing that will stop, prevent, or cure this disease. Other than living a brain healthy lifestyle may prevent it, may delay it. 4 out of 10 cases might be delayed or prevented. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And so, and I spent a lot of years, a lot of time with anger and depression. And don't get me wrong, I still do. I'm a human.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have to remember, I have to think of myself and the things that are going to keep me healthy, because we need to do that in order to hopefully grow old, which is the goal, right?
So that's terrific segue here, because we'd like to give Nick some tips that would make give him the power to be the best version of himself and his family. And I've just jotted down a few things you all talked about.
What's on the list?
So
what did we say?
The
what do we
first
got?
one is meet them where they're at.
Yes.
/ acceptance,
Yes.
right? That was big.
Don't yell. Don't try to convince your mom she doesn't have a new boyfriend.
Right.
Yeah.
She in her head she does. Now you got 2 dads for a little while.
and what I love about this is we always say meet people where they're at, except when they're sick.
Yeah.
We're always trying to fix it. I love that. The second one I have here is care for yourself. For the caregiver.
Yeah, definitely.
And especially if his mother is in a home, they're feeding her, there are people watching her. There's not much you need to be doing.
There were times that I literally would stop and I would see my mom for 5 minutes. I'd walk in, I'd kiss her on the head, I'd say a thing or two, I'd squeeze her hand, and then I left. Because that was all I could take, and that felt like enough to remind her, she is loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we're together. And in a way, like Nick could make a schedule. You know, as Seth said, like she is cared for.
Mhm.
He doesn't have to go every day. He doesn't have to go 5 times a week. He could go
Yeah.
twice a week,
Yeah.
once a week, whatever works, so that he is also there to show up for his family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the next one I have here is seek helpful resources,
Yes.
turn to the professionals.
Yeah.
And that
Big
goes with the next one is the family therapy, joining
Yeah.
a support group. I think that's all one big category.
Definitely. And we at HFC can help point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
There are a lot of services out there that are there to help people navigate through this. You really don't have to do it alone. It is such an isolating thing to care for a loved one with dementia,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have to be.
And one last thing, which you both hit on, that we experience with our mom is, what would your mom want?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something that we can all do for our family members. It doesn't have to just be children, but the people who are going to be here after we're gone. Let them know what
Yeah.
you want.
Yeah.
And
It takes the
Let's-
pressure off.
Let's talk about death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
We're such a youth obsessed culture.
Mhm.
Like ignoring death doesn't do anyone any favors.
No. And if Nick, again, like, yeah, a good thing for Nick to think is if he has the choice between going and visiting his mom and spending time with his wife, asking himself, what would my mom want me to do in this situation?
Ooh, that's
And, she,
powerful.
and as he
Mhm.
said, she thinks he's an asshole.
Exactly.
So-
She doesn't
Yeah.
want to see him
You need to do
anyway.
that
Hang out with your wife, who hopefully doesn't
Right,
also think you're an
right.
asshole.
Don't let it get to
I
that point
hope
where
Nick's
she
just
too
not-
thinks you're an
Yeah,
asshole, Nick.
exactly.
Then we think you're wonderful.
Yes.
We think
So
you're
take
great.
your wife out.
Exactly. Take your wife out on the town in Miami.
right.
Lots of stuff to do there. Lots of good restaurants.
Well, you guys are doing some great work, and thank you for sharing. Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
investment that you're making. Thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty, because that's also, normalizing the issue as much as it is not normal and will never feel normal, but talking about it and letting people know that they're not alone. And again, I just want to say, let's not be afraid of humor in the midst of this. I mean,
absolutely.
it gets
That's
our
why it's
family
hilarity
through.
for charity.
Yeah,
I mean, we found that was like, at first we were very uncomfortable with the combination of comedy and Alzheimer's, honestly. And it felt very inorganic. And then, yeah, we found that people coming and telling their stories and keeping a humorous perspective amidst all this is like so cathartic and helpful, and people like to laugh and can shift gears very easily and can contain both of those things at once. And so, yeah, humor is helpful. I don't know if it's the best medicine, but it's a
It's
pretty
pretty
good
good one.
It's a necessary one.
I tell you
Pretty
what,
good one.
thank you guys for being here. This has
Thank
been
you so
great.
much.
Thank you.
And
This
Thank
has
good
been
luck
really
with
great.
everything. Yeah, we
Thank you.
we
And
hopefully
safe travels.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Be well. Be
Thank
well.
you.